The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves. An irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
Good to see you again, Lisa. How have things been since we last chatted?
Oh, it's good to see you too. Things have been good, just busy, but all the good kind of busy. So no complaints.
What's the goodest busyness you have right now?
The goodest, I like how you said that. The goodest business that I have right now, I would have to say, is the podcast that I just launched a few weeks ago with my
Congrats.
co-host. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
What's it called?
we're excited. It's called The Survivors, and
Okay.
it's a unique format. It's a different kind of perspective on suicide loss and that kind of grief and mental illness that's attached to it. And I'm a 3-time survivor of suicide loss that I know you and I will talk a lot about today. And my co-host is a survivor of a suicide attempt. So we both have a really unique perspective to bring to that conversation in terms of what it's like to be in that headspace. I'm also a crisis counselor, so what it's like when people call crisis lifeline. So there's a lot that we talk about that all kind of revolves around suicide awareness and prevention.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're launching the podcast, or it launched. You said it launched. Did you already
It's
release
launched
the
this-
first episode?
Yeah, today actually
Great.
launched episode 3, so we're in the groove.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
exciting. I guess love is kind of a strange word to apply to anything in that space, but I
Mm,
would like to explore with you just what comes up with suicide and the ideas around it and the experiences around it. It's not something I'm very grateful to say I have not personally had much experience with it.
Mhm.
I don't expect that will continue to be the case for my whole life, just based on how prevalent it is.
Yeah.
But I'd like to be better informed and understand the experience more. Would you mind just opening up that conversation?
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you want to have it. A lot of people are afraid, and naturally they're afraid because it's scary. Whether you've been touched by it or not, we all know about it. And it's a touchy subject. It's still taboo, unfortunately, in so many ways. That's one of the things that my co-host and I are trying to do, is to break down that stigma around suicide and around mental illness and all those things that we're taught not to talk about.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's important, so important that we talk about it because, like you said, you're one of the lucky ones at this point in your life where you haven't been directly touched by it. The sad reality is that eventually, in some way, you will be, whether it's someone you know in your immediate circle orbit or someone, that you kind of know at a distance. It will find you, and it will find all of us in one way or another. And we do need to be prepared. We need to be prepared to understand it and prepared to talk about it and prepared to know what to do if those kinds of situations touch us either directly, like if we're not okay and we need help ourselves, or if we know somebody who needs help. We need to know how to navigate those conversations because they're tough, and they don't have to be quite as scary as we make them out to be. We just have to be armed with the right kinds of resources and information and knowledge to be able to navigate them.
Yeah. So what would you say is the most, let's just say I'm starting from absolute ground zero and have
Yeah.
no relevant understanding at this point. Like, assuming I'm going to have some experiences soon, how would you prepare me mentally? What would be kind of like the first tools or things to understand or know that would help me to navigate in an empathetic and effective way a situation like that?
Well, I love the question. I appreciate the question because I think it's a question a lot of people need to be asking themselves who aren't already somehow involved in this kind of a scenario or a situation. So I think the first thing to really recognize is that whether you have a really strong existing community and support system, which a lot of people do, a lot of people have a partner or a spouse or a big friend community, or maybe they're very active in their outward community, so they've got a lot of people behind them. There are a lot of people who don't. And It it does obviously matter how much support you have in your life, but it's important to know that even if you don't have those obvious places where you can go and people you can lean into, you're never alone. No matter who you are or what kind of support you do or don't have, there are resources, there are platforms, there are people out there who can help you no matter what you're dealing with. And I think the most important thing to keep top of mind is just that there is this thing called the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, and it's out there. And it's saving people every day, and it's free. And there are people just like me. I'm a 988 crisis counselor, although I work on a different lifeline. I work for the Trevor Project. That's a
Mhm.
if people haven't heard of it, the Trevor Project is the largest LGBTQ focused crisis and support lifeline. We cater to youth ages 13 to 24, but we do talk to everybody in all the demographics, but that's kind of our sweet spot. And
Just real quick, in case, someone's listening who wants to have direct contact info. So 988, if I just type those numbers into my phone, will that get
mhm,
me to the right place?
that will
The
get you
first
to
one?
the right place absolutely every
Okay.
single time. And there will be a person on the other end of the line who is trained. Now, keep in mind, people are not calling and getting a clinician on the phone.
Sure.
We do have clinicians, like, it depends on the situation, if we have to involve one of our licensed and trained counselors who are always kind of on staff and out there in the ether,
Mhm.
supporting counselors like myself, those people are there, but primarily you're gonna talk to people who have been trained in crisis de-escalation and trained to hold space, trained to give resources, and to just
Yeah.
really show up and listen to you. So that's what you're going to get when you call
Okay.
that number, and it doesn't matter what time of day or night, we're here 24 hours a day, every day of the year.
Great. And the Trevor Project, is there also a phone number for that?
There is, it's 866, um, 866. Now I have to remember the number because I'm so used to being on the other end
You're on the other
of
end
the
usually.
phone
Yeah.
line. Let's
Okay.
see,
I can
I
try to
wanna
pull it up too.
yeah, I wanna give you the correct number. Isn't that terrible? I'm always
No,
the
that's
one on
okay.
the other end of the phone. 866-488-7386. Yeah, I might have to jog my memory.
Yeah, okay.
It's like you never call your kids. For me, in my case, I never call my kids' cell phones. It's always on
Yeah,
speed dial, so I have to
it's
stop and
Vidal,
think about
I
it.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
just wanted to
should
put
be
that out there in case.
866-488-7386.
Okay, great.
And people can also text the Trevor Project
Oh,
at
cool.
678-678 START, because some people just don't
Yeah,
feel like they're ready to jump onto a conversation
I found
where
the
you're
website too,
yeah.
thetrevorproject.org. Okay,
Mhm.
great.
Yeah, yeah,
Love to put
and
the resource out.
oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate that so much, and we get a lot of 988 overflow calls as well,
Mhm.
so we're out there not just in support of the LGBTQ community, but we talk to everyone who makes it through, kind of through our system. So,
Mhm.
it's knowing those things, like kind of knowing what you have out there in terms of resources and support above anything, just to know where to go if there's a crisis. That's what's most important.
Mhm.
And the other thing is just really understanding how important it is to be transparent about how you're feeling yourself. Like, if we're talking about how you would navigate it if you weren't okay, like you, Colin,
Yeah,
were not
yeah.
okay. A lot of that is, again, resourcing places like Trevor Project or 988 or the crisis text line. And it's also just being vulnerable. It's allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Like, let yourself have the conversations, the hard conversations with the people in your life who you know that you can trust, places you can go where you know that you feel safe and you feel supported. That's so important because there's so many people out there who keep what's going on so deep down inside them that there's no way anybody on the outside knows what's going on. And that's a tough situation to navigate because you can't fix what you don't know is broken.
Mhm.
So being open about what's going on inside, if you're the one struggling, is a huge piece of the equation. And then if you're talking about how do you deal with someone, for instance, like if you had a friend or you got a colleague
Yeah,
who you just noticed something's off. Maybe it's very obvious. Maybe they're the kind of person who's talking about it. Maybe they're saying, "I'm really not okay. I've really I've really been going through it. I'm struggling. Like that's one thing. That's kind of easier to see and identify. But if you don't have someone saying those things that really gives you that clear indicator that something's wrong, then you're really relying on other cues. Things like
Mhm.
maybe they're maybe they're just not returning your phone calls. Maybe they're just canceling plans in ways that they haven't done before. Maybe they're not doing what they would normally do in terms of their work performance. Maybe that's thrown off. Maybe they don't care about taking care of themselves anymore. Maybe they were like big gym people. Maybe they don't go to the gym anymore. They don't run anymore. They don't do any of the things that they used to do. So things like that are kind of telltale signs when you know that something is off, and it becomes really important if you're the one who's seeing that to really have a direct conversation. And again, these are scary things
Mhm.
because so many people want to help. They want to be there, and you definitely want to support your people. But A, we often don't know how, and B, we're often scared to death about what happens when we ask the person, "Are you okay?" And they say, "No." "Oh my god, what do I do now?
Right,
How
yeah,
do
so what do you do now?
what do you do now?" I knew you were gonna
Question,
say that.
yeah.
So, it all, again, ties back to doing things like giving that person a crisis lifeline number or a platform, or maybe you're asking them directly, like, "Hey, are you seeing a therapist? Are you talking to anybody? Is there any place that you can go or anyone that you've been able to connect with where you can really have open, honest conversations about what's going on?" And maybe if they say no, if they haven't considered therapy, maybe you help them find a therapist. Maybe you put them in touch with someone, or maybe you do a little bit of research on their behalf. So there are definitely ways that you can encourage someone to to care for themselves. Like, at the end of the day, you and I and anybody who's listening and anybody who does what I do on Crisis Lifelines, it's not our responsibility to fix what's going on with someone. It's definitely our responsibility to fix what's going on with ourselves, and there are lots of different ways that we can do that and lots of different places we can go for help in doing that. But when you're talking about someone you're trying to help, the onus is really on them. Like, you can only show up to a point. You can only offer so many resources before it
Mhm.
becomes critical that that person meets you halfway. They have to do the work.
Uh, I wanna be more educated on, like, what are the primary causes? Is there good research on the number 1 predictor, the highest predictors of, um, suicidal behaviors?
It's an interesting question. There is a lot of data around that, but it depends on kind of the segment of the population that you're talking about. Like,
Okay.
men in their 50s and 60s tend to be one of our larger populations of people who
Mm.
are experiencing suicidality or who are taking their lives. And then you obviously have the whole teen population, and then you have marginalized populations like, the rates they skyrocket, like in the LGBTQ community, in particular in the trans community. So, it depends on where you drill down, those numbers will fluctuate. But in terms of what's causing people to get to that point, I mean, it could be any number of different things. It can be loss of a job, it could be loss of a relationship, it can be loss of another person in their life. I mean, there's so many different factors. Could be um,
I guess, is there, like, a more unifying underlying thing? Because those are, I would call, like, more
triggers.
situational,
Mm.
yeah, or circumstantial factors. Is there something, like a unifying principle or deeper thing under that that's been widely
Meaning
identified?
meaning depression. Is that what you mean?
Or maybe a level deeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
I don't know. Is
Okay.
the answer to that question. I mean, if you're talking about, more specifics, then, obviously, depression is kind of that precursor to, depression is a form of mental illness, is a or a symptom rather of mental illness, and that's, it plays a huge role in what kind of brings someone up to the brink, up to that point. But again, it's hard. It depends on who the person is and what they're dealing with, in terms of triggers and things like that. There's so many of them. That's the sad part.
Yeah. Okay. So is there not like a set of established kind of risk factors? Because like typically with a disease, you're going to have like risk factors. If you're in this group, you've got a higher percent for this. Like, is there something similar for? Um, I wouldn't just call it suicide, but I think you called suicidality was the word you used. I'm
For
not familiar
suicidality,
with
well, I
that
mean, if
term.
someone has
Yeah,
a history of depression, if someone
sure.
has a history of substance abuse, if someone is involved in a situation where they're being abused, either physically
Mhm.
abused or sexually abused, I mean, all of those kinds of scenarios are way more apt to kind of put a person in that mindset to,
Yeah.
to elevate a person's stress level and, um, create more toxic situations that where the outcome is more likely to be that someone feels hopeless and someone wants
Mhm.
to consider ending their life.
Mhm. If let's say someone is concerned that somebody in their life might be suicidal, but they're not sure. Like the
Mhm.
person hasn't stated it. Is there an evidence-based like way to tease that out in a way that's safe and so you can support them better? Like what might that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, again, it's kind of simplistic,
Okay. Simple's
but
great.
yeah, no, I mean, and that's actually what you need, in that case, simple is always best. So what you really wanna do is if you have that suspicion or pretty decisively that someone wants to end their life, you're just gonna say to them directly, "Are you thinking of killing yourself?" And that's the
Mm.
language that you need to be using, like, those are
Oh,
the
okay.
words in that exact way that you need to say to someone, and a lot of people get a little tweaky about that because
Mhm.
it's really scary to say
Very
those
uncomfortable
things.
question, yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very
Can you state the
difficult.
question again for people who are listening and maybe missed it the first time just
Absolutely,
quickly?
absolutely. If someone you care about, someone in your life is not okay and you think they're not okay, you need to ask them in very direct language, saying it just like this: "Are you thinking of harming yourself or are you thinking of killing yourself?" And then, it's kind of like the way that we do it on the Lifeline, that's part of a risk assessment. That's the
Mm.
first
Okay.
risk assessment. Those are the first couple of risk assessment questions that we ask. And depending on how someone answers, there's gets kind of a decision tree. I'm thinking of it,
Mm.
in terms of, the visual representation of that decision tree. You have the question up at the top, and then if they say yes, you go one way down the tree, and if they say no, you go another way down the tree. So if they say no, then you just kind of dig a little bit deeper into, well, what is going on? What are you dealing with? This is a safe space. I want to hear what's happening. You can trust me to hold the space for you. That's kind of how you want to handle it if someone says, no, I'm not thinking about killing myself, but I'm not okay. Like I'm feeling depressed. Then you want to talk about like, you know, are you seeing a therapist? Do you need help seeing a therapist? What are you doing to try and help yourself? If someone says yes, then the very first thing you wanna ask after that is, "Have you done anything today to try and harm yourself?" And again, the decision tree continues. If they say no, okay, well, let's talk about, the feelings that you have that you don't wanna be here anymore, that you wanna end your life. Let's talk about that. What kind of safety plan can we come up with to make sure that you're safe today? That's how you wanna handle that. And if somebody says, "Yes, I have actually tried to do something." Well, okay, well, what did you try and do to harm yourself today? And, what are the means that you used? Where are they right now? Where are those means? Like if it were pills, if it was a weapon of some kind, you would ask, "Where is that thing right now?" And then if they say, "Well, it's here. I'm in the kitchen and it's on the counter." Well, can you do me a favor while we're talking? Either you're talking to somebody on the phone or maybe you're in person with them. Well, let's separate the person from that the means. Get them out of the room. Put it in a drawer. Walk into another part of your house or wherever you are in that moment. So you're really trying to kind of, break apart the whole scenario. And in terms of the way we handle a risk assessment, we kind of gauge everything not only on, whether someone is like actively trying to do something in that moment or if they have a time frame. Like we have to establish, is this something you're thinking about doing today? Is it tomorrow, next week, next month? And depending on if it's inside of
And would
20.
you ask just like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have a plan? Yes, I have a plan. When are you thinking? of harming yourself or trying to take your life. Well, I'm going to do it. Today's Monday. I'm going to do it this weekend. Okay, well, that's in with our rubric and kind of the way, and I'm only speaking in terms of Trevor Project right now, and I know that 988 and a lot of the other crisis lifelines are very similar,
Okay.
that the way that we classify an imminent risk suicide call is when someone's plan is to execute their plan, whatever it is, within 24 hours. That's considered imminent risk. That's like right here, right now, we have to de-escalate that. If it's, 2 days, 3 days, a week from now, it's still considered high risk because they have a time frame, but it's not today. It's not
hmm
within the 24-hour
So the
period.
time frame is kind of like that's
It's
like a
key.
key
Mhm.
indicator
It
of
is.
risk.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then, if you're in that kind of a situation, again, you're trying to separate the person from the means if they have it there with them. You're trying to establish, what kind of, you know, safety outlets there are. Like, do you have a therapist? Do you have a spouse or a partner? Is anybody else in the home with you right now? Is there anywhere else that you can go? Um, and then you may have to start considering things like interventions, and that could look like a voluntary intervention, and that just means that you're kind of working, or I, in my case, as a counselor, let's say I'm on the phone line with someone. I'm working with that person, and I'm encouraging that person to call their therapist or to call a family member or a hospital on their behalf, like on their own behalf. And then if it's kind of like an you know, more of an involuntary situation, either I could call on their behalf, or then we might, if it's a really, really touchy situation and the person does not want to call on their behalf, is really kind of, committed to this idea, and you can't de-escalate them, then we might have to get a third party involved and do something called an involuntary intervention, and we call law enforcement and we call EMT services
Okay.
in that person's area.
Do you mind if I run back through the steps that I put together in my brain?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Let me
Yeah, yeah.
see what I caught. Okay. So the first question, see if I get it. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Was that
Yes. Mhm.
okay?
You can say killing yourself, or you can even say harming yourself.
Okay.
Either one of those things, but
Okay.
and I wanna stop for a second if I
Please.
can and just add something to that. We talked a little while ago about why asking a question like that can be terrifying. It can be really
Mhm.
hard to hear, and it can be super hard to say.
Yeah.
People have this instinct that, "Oh my god, if I say that to someone, well, that's gonna insert the idea into their head. It's gonna push them closer to doing the thing," and that's what people's instinct tells them,
Mhm.
because we're human and we get worried that we're gonna do something
Yeah,
to
of course.
make it worse.
Yeah.
The reality of that is that there have been so many studies done that have concluded that by actually asking directly, you are drastically reducing the percentage of likelihood that someone will actually harm themselves or take their life. And
Wow.
the reason for that, yeah, it's wild. And the reason for that is because when you say that in that language, that automatically, in that moment, that identifies you as someone who's really hearing them. Like you're there listening to this person, and you're validating that they're struggling, and you're validating that they're in a bad headspace, and that they need help, and that they're, maybe teetering on the edge. And when you do that, it creates a pathway. It creates uh, a chain of communication between you and that person that's on a different level. It shows that person like, okay, they see me. They're
Mhm.
taking me seriously. So it does an awful lot to, to really de-escalate that person's mindset, because now they feel like they're being seen and heard.
Yeah, and my instinct with that too is like if someone has never thought about that, you saying that, it's probably not gonna be like, "Oh, what a great idea. I hadn't considered that." And if someone has thought about it, it's not like it's already in their head.
Right.
So you're probably not, like you're not probably the one making that happen. So
Right.
yeah, I really
Right.
appreciate you saying that though. I didn't know about the research on that. So
Yeah.
that's good to
And I
know.
know, I can tell that you're a data guy, you're a stats guy, or an evidence based guy. So one interesting thing bit of Trevor Project data that I can give you that is, again, kind of a wild statistic is that, and this is speaking within the LGBTQ community, for every one person who may be calling us who is at risk of harming themselves or taking their life,
Mhm.
just having one single person listen to them. Now, that could be a crisis counselor, it could be a friend or a colleague or a family member. One person listening to you when you're in that state will reduce the risk of your suicide by 40%. So, I mean,
Wow.
it's
I
like
had no
that.
idea.
Yeah, that one data point alone has always kind of blown my mind because, I mean, you're talking about almost half the percentage of likelihood that a person will harm themselves just having a single person to either, hold space for you or talk to you or support you.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that was important, but I had never heard that stat before. That's pretty amazing. I
Mm,
mean, it's empowering. It's also sad because it also, like, says something about how many people don't have a person. Um,
yeah.
so
Yeah, and you know what? In
sobering.
terms of that, I'm kind of glad you made that comment. This goes back to what we've kind of been saying while we've been talking about how even if you don't have like a support system that that you like a dedicated support system in your life, there
Mhm,
are places like the 988 Lifeline and Trevor Project and all of these other organizations. And what's so interesting, at least within the Trevor Project community, we have people who we call, like we have an internal name for people who call regularly. Like they'll call every
mhm,
day, same time of day typically, and they'll only be on the phone for a few minutes, but they're identified in our system as what's called familiar voices. And these are
mhm,
people who they maybe don't have anyone in their life. They don't have a community or a family or anyone to really talk to. And they're not necessarily calling us because they're in active crisis, but
mhm.
they're calling because they just want human connection. And
Yeah.
we're there for that too. Because I think one of the things that a lot of people don't stop to think about, or they just automatically think that it's not true. People have a false perception about crisis lifelines, like, "Oh, I can only call something like the 988 Lifeline or the Trevor Project if I'm, like, in a suicidal state of mind." That is absolutely false. That's
Mm,
absolutely untrue, and that doesn't just apply to the Trevor Project, it applies to the 988 Crisis Lifeline and the crisis text line and any of these other support platforms. If you're in crisis, and what might be constituting a crisis for you might not be for me,
mhm,
but it's all relative, right? So if you're in crisis because maybe you've had a bad breakup or you lost your job or you're dealing with homelessness or you're in an abusive relationship or you're stressed about coming out to your family, like any of those things represent a crisis to you. So let's just set the record straight right now and say if whatever's going on in your life, in your head, in your heart is affecting you and your mental health in a negative way, that's a reason to call a lifeline. That's a reason to reach out.
yeah. I'm glad you're sharing that. I think, that's a change of perspective for me, so I'm sure it is for a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. I
Really
hope
good to
so.
know. Um, that's something. Oh, yeah, it was so earlier in the conversation, I was asking about maybe if, like, underlying factors, kinda high predictors,
Mm.
but then something that you just said about having a person, to me, like, working backwards, to me, that seems like a huge underlying factor then, because if it reduces the rates by 40% to have someone to talk to, then that would, to me, if we kind of flip the logic around, that means, probably a really heavy factor is not having someone to talk to.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely isolation, and we're in an isolation epidemic right now in a lot of ways. I mean, granted, maybe not quite to the same degree that we were a couple of years ago when we were kind of in the thick of COVID and we were distancing and
Yeah.
everyone was isolating and at home, but we are still very much in an a loneliness epidemic, and it really has a huge impact on people's mental health because you think about it, and There was a statistic that I read, I believe it was a New York Times article within the last several weeks about thought loops and
Mhm.
what goes on in our heads, and something like 95% of the thoughts that we have, and whatever the thoughts are in our heads, are recycled day after day after day. So you're talking about out of 100% of the things that we as humans think about every day, our families, our job, our friends, our life, what's going on TikTok, whatever,
Mhm.
only 5% of that is unique every day. 95% of our self-talk, of the narratives that we play in our heads, that's coming from the day before and the week before and the month before, and it's really difficult to break through out of that place in your head,
Mhm.
especially when you're not getting any other outside influences, when you're not talking to people and you're not connected with people and you're not sharing what's going on in your head with other people. So, in that way, those loops just continue endlessly, and that's what festers. That's what causes a lot of anxiety and creates a lot of depression in people because they can't break out of that headspace because there's no way to break out of it. There's no differentiating factor.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. It's like, well, especially if you're kind of your own worst enemy, and that's the only person that you're talking to
Yeah.
mentally, it's like,
Yeah.
how do you have novel thoughts? Well, you could try to have novel thoughts.
Ye
That's probably easier said than done, or maybe talk to someone different who has different thoughts, and they'll be new to you.
Right, well, that's
Yeah.
the thing, and, again, that's what I think one of the biggest antidotes to this whole loneliness epidemic is really just not only reaching out and connecting and finding community, but, just sharing and being vulnerable. We all have stuff we deal with, and so much of what we deal with is so similar to what everybody walking around us all day is dealing with. It's just kind of, in a different headspace or under a different roof, but we're all dealing with it. And it's when we start to recognize that we're not alone in dealing with the things that we're dealing with, that's when a lot of that angst can be can be managed, because a lot of what we deal with is like, oh, nobody's dealing with this like I am. Nobody's struggling with it like I am, until you find out that so many people are. And that's liberating in a lot of ways. That's comforting in a lot of ways and validating. So, there's so much to be said for just opening up and sharing what's going on the inside to be able to get the support that you need in that moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Alright, I wanna put
Mm.
myself back on the hot seat and try to we went on another really good tangent, but okay. The first question, are you thinking about killing yourself?
Yep.
Okay, I got it right again. Cool. Okay, so
And
locking in the
if they say
yep,
yes, what are you
yep.
going to do?
Alright, so the next question, I think it was something to do with the day. So
Hmm.
was it what have you done today?
Or how about, have you done anything today
Have you done anything today
to try
to
and harm yourself?
try to harm yourself? Okay,
Yep.
so that was question number 2.
And let's say they answer yes.
Yeah, answer is yes. Then it's focusing on separating person and means, I think was the next step.
There's one little thing in between that. You're right, but there's one little thing
Great.
in between that. If the person says, "Yeah, I have done something today." Okay, what have you done today? Because
Okay.
it's important. Have they taken a bunch of pills? Have they been cutting? Did they go out and buy some supplies to facilitate something? Like, you don't know what they
Yes.
did,
Okay.
so it's hard to know how to handle the answer to that question unless you know more specific. So you want to drill down a little bit. What have you done today? So now they
Okay.
tell you that, well, I'm thinking about cutting myself. So then what do you
Okay.
do?
So then the next question, not sure how to word this quite, but, like, it would be a where question, I think.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
where, um, where's the knife is the first
Yeah.
thing that comes to
Well,
mind.
and that's right. You're
Yeah.
100% right.
Okay.
Well, I think, and at the same time, you might even be able to clarify, like, you just don't know what someone might utilize. So you might say,
Mm,
tell me more about how you were gonna do that. How
okay.
are you gonna cut yourself? And then that way you'll kind of know for sure, like, okay, they were gonna do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so then they tell you now, yes, I was going to use a knife and I was gonna try and do this thing. So, okay, where's the knife right now? So you already nailed that. Where is the means.
Okay.
And they say it's right here. It's right here with me. Then what do you do?
Okay. So I want to separate.
Yes.
I guess my instinct would be to ask like a permission question
Mm-hmm.
of something like, um, would you be willing to set the knife in a drawer or something like that right now? Something like
Exactly.
that?
Nailed it.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what you would do. And, maybe you would even consider going one step further and saying, hey, listen, if you're in the kitchen right now, can you put that knife back in the drawer and then can you go in the living room for me? Let's just get out of the room where that thing is. You kind of want to create as much distance between you and that item or object as you possibly can. So
Mhm.
now they've done that. Now they've put the knife in the drawer and they've gone and they're sitting in the living room. What do you think you would do at that point?
So this is where I would ask if they have someone to talk to other than
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
do you have a therapist or someone that you trust that you can talk to, or someone in the house or
Mhm.
something like that?
Yep, exactly, exactly. The only other thing that you might wanna do if you haven't already done it is to establish a time frame.
Mm,
And that might be backing up a tiny bit at some point, within the questioning of how were you going to do this? What were you going to use to do this? When were you going to do this? When were you planning on doing it today? Tell me when you were thinking of doing this. And then they'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna do it. I was gonna do it after I got off the phone with you or, tomorrow." So somewhere in there, if you have the ability to ask what their timing is, you wanna do that. So then you've done all those things. You've questioned them directly. Are you thinking of harming yourself? They say yes. Have you done anything to harm yourself today? They say yes. I'm starting to do something now. What are you using? When are you thinking of doing this? And now you've done a great job of getting them to separate themselves from that object that they were going to use, and now they're in a different room, and you've just asked them, who do you have to talk to? Who
mm,
who can you go to? So all of the things that you're doing right now you're building a safety plan, and that's
gotcha.
key. That is so you've already kind of completed what we call a risk assessment. So that's
Okay.
we do that. Most lifelines will conduct a risk assessment within the first 5 minutes of being on the phone with you. At the same time that we're trying to create a rapport with you because we want you to feel comfortable, like we're there for you and only for you. So we're assessing your risk, and then once we have you kind of separated from the thing you were going to do, now we can talk about like, okay, what do we do going forward? Who can you
Mhm.
call? And now you could run into a situation realistically where the person is like, I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone to call. I can't do anything. I can't do
Mhm.
anything right now.
And that's when you'd be like, would you mind if we walk through that together? I could help you find
Yes.
someone." That would be
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And then if for whatever reason maybe they say to you, look, like Colin, I can't do it. I can't make the phone call. I don't know what to do. You can say, listen, do you give me permission to call the hospital? Would you consider going to the hospital right now? If you don't have a therapist, maybe we can get you to a program. And you might have to make the phone call for that person. Or
Mhm.
you say, listen, can you feel comfortable calling 988? So that's the thing. That's for anybody listening to our conversation right now, yours and mine. When you're at that point where you're trying to create a safety plan for someone, you're not going to have all the answers. You're not
Mhm.
going to know all the resources. You may not even know what's in your area. If it's not your area of expertise, you don't necessarily know what resources are available. So the most important thing for every single person who's listening to our conversation right now to keep in the back of their mind is you also, as a friend who are trying to help someone who's in active crisis, you can call 988. You can call the 988 lifeline while you're with the person. And that's called a third party call. We get them all the time
Mm.
where someone says, "Oh my God, I'm with my son. He's not okay. What do I do?" Or can you talk to him? Or in your case, you would say, "I'm with a friend and they're not okay. They're expressing the intent to harm themselves. What do I do? And then now you've got someone on the line who is trained to do more of the things that you've been doing, which is to de-escalate. And they've got people on the line. So whenever I'm on the crisis lifeline, I'm listening to your conversation. Whoever I'm talking to, it's me and it's them. But I have a network of supervisors and clinicians they're not on the call with us, but they're on my computer screen. And I'm messaging them if I need extra resources or extra language or extra support, and they're there to help me. So the same thing would apply if you called 988 for a friend. They're going to be there with a whole army of people on their end of that lifeline to support you supporting your friend.
Mhm.
So maybe your friend says, yeah, I could talk to them. I could talk to a counselor on the phone right now. And so maybe they get on the phone and they talk. Or maybe they say to you, Colin, I can't do it. I don't have the bandwidth to do this. I'm not in the headspace to do it. Can you talk to them for me? Can always do that. And then you can kind of be that conduit, and things kind of run between you and a lifeline counselor. So there
Okay.
are so many different ways that you can get the person who's struggling the help that they need. And you're not alone
Mhm.
giving them that help.
Yeah, you don't have to be a professional. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. I'm gonna run myself through it one more time. Spaced
Yeah.
repetition's helpful.
Yeah.
I have notes. I'm not gonna use them.
No, don't use them. This
That
is
one.
not an open book exam.
Yeah, I wanna practice. Okay. I'll do it with my eyes closed just
Okay,
this
good.
one. Okay. Are you thinking of killing yourself or
Yep.
harming yourself?
Mhm.
Be the first question. Okay, if they say yes, have you done anything today to try to harm yourself?
Yep.
If they say yes, what have you done today to try to harm yourself?
Mhm.
Um, or maybe add for clarity, how are you thinking or how were you? I guess you probably use were you instead of are you, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
How were you thinking? Get more specific.
Mhm.
And that might be a good time to ask if they say yes, they have a plan. When, okay, well, when were
Yep.
you thinking of trying this? Would that be
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
When were you
Perfect.
thinking of trying this?
Mhm.
Okay. Um, let's see. Where is and then fill in the blank with whatever the items might be.
Mhm. Yep. Whatever that means is you want to identify what it is and where is it in proximity to that person.
hmm And then if it's in close proximity, asking them if they would mind or could you put that somewhere, go into a different room, phrase the question however makes sense for the situation.
Yep. Perfect.
Um, Once they're in that space, asking a who question of, um, do you have anyone that you could talk to about this? Do you have a therapist you could talk to, a friend, someone close by,
Mhm.
something like that? Um, if they say no, asking, would you mind if I help you to identify a person or get connected with somebody or find the right platform?
Mhm.
If they say yes, inviting them to call or connect. Um, and then let's see, let's say uh, they don't have a person, they're not prepared to make a call. Would you mind if I make a call for you or
Mhm.
make that connection? I think that takes us to the present where we
It
are.
takes us to I have to say, I feel like your future as a crisis counselor is rock solid.
Great. Okay.
Very, very impressed. No, you've got it. I mean, that's really kind of the cycle. Obviously there are different variables. It depends on, where the person really is at in terms of an attempt. Are they just having suicidal feelings, or is it really a full-blown attempt? Things like that. Are they in the midst of it, or are they just contemplating it? Like, there are different variables for sure, but you've absolutely got the essence of kind of the flow of how that goes. And you can see how that decision tree plays
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
If it's no, I'm not going to do anything to hurt myself, but I'm just down. I'm bad in my head. I'm not okay. Well, that's a different conversation. It's like that. Then you can kind of jump to the safety plan or the support plan. Like, okay, well then who do you have to talk to? What what kind of resources do you have or do you need, or is there a group or um, a particular person to help? So Yeah, you've absolutely got it, and I think for a lot of people, hopefully a lot of people who are listening to our conversation can take some comfort in the fact that there is this incredible resource, this 988 lifeline that's
Mhm.
there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can call it again if you are the person who's struggling or if you know someone who's struggling. And I think that should really kind of take the edge off where people are concerned, like, what do I do? What do I do? And
Yeah.
it's so paralyzing because when you're in a situation where it's potentially a life or death situation, and oftentimes a lot of these phone calls are. I mean, there are times when I will get on a lifeline call, and within the first 30 seconds, I know that we are in an imminent risk suicide situation. And when that happens, I'm on that call for the duration. Like if that's a 3-hour long call, I've had that happen many, many times where it's a call that goes beyond the scope of my shift even in terms of
Mhm.
timing, and I am on that call until that person is de-escalated and safe and has a plan and knows that we're gonna call them back and we're gonna follow up with them and all the boxes have been checked. So knowing that we all have a resource that will always be there takes a lot of the pressure off, I think.
Yeah, and this process, like string of questions that you provided, to me, I see this kind of like mental CPR, like
Yeah.
get learn this stuff. Hopefully you don't have to use it. Obviously, that's not the desire,
Mhm.
but much better to have it than to not have it. And it yeah. So this was helpful for me to have that
Oh, I'm so
and
glad. I'm so glad. A
also
lot of a lot of
pass it
organizations
on
now,
to
the fact that
mhm.
you just said mental CPR, a lot of places, a lot of organizations, companies, they're instituting what they're calling, mental health first aid,
Yeah.
and they're doing whole programs. Like, for instance, I do a lot of work with the YMCA here in Boston, and there's a huge mental health movement within their organization, and they're training their staff on mental health first aid to how to navigate exactly the kind of a situation that you and I were talking about. How to create inclusive environments, how to, spot when someone isn't okay, how to handle that. Um, so it's happening more and more and more frequently, and companies are starting to do that on the regular now, which is beautiful because then, like you said, people have the tools they need, and hopefully they don't have to use them, but they have them if they do.
Well, and it's very empowering to me, especially that first question, like what you said about it, the 40% stat, all those things. Like
Mhm.
if you have that question in your back pocket and you feel empowered to ask that question, and if someone's like, "No, what are you talking about?" Well, it's like, "Okay, well, I'm sorry. I really care about you. I saw something was off. I just wanted to check." Like
It's
that's
as simple as that.
yeah,
It's
it's
as simple as
probably, it's probably a unless you deliver it just really terribly, it's probably a do no harm type of thing and it could do a lot of good.
Mhm.
And so, like for me personally, and I would invite people listening, I'm gonna like practice this string of questions just so I feel very comfortable with it because I'd rather, I've heard and I believe it's true that you kind of default to your lowest level of training in crisis situations.
Mhm.
And so if you just are listening to this episode and you heard the questions and you just like listen to it once, that doesn't mean that it's readily available in your brain and it's going to be there when you need it. It's something that you probably have to practice a little bit and freshen up on and get in your head. But
Absolutely. It's a great
it,
idea to do
yeah,
that. And I really, really appreciate that we're having this conversation because I feel like so many people really are ill-equipped through no fault of their own. People are just we are just not trained as a culture. Number 1, to have these conversations because they're still so taboo in so many ways. And number 2, we're not prepared when we do have to have them, how to have them and how to execute those kinds of conversations. So, it goes back to just being comfortable in a scenario, being comfortable with the actions that you need to take in a given situation so that when and if that situation presents itself, you know what to do.
yeah. So I wanted to ask about let's say somebody has a therapist, they have someone to talk to,
Mhm.
but they're a good friend or someone you know well, and they're consistently maybe in stage number 1 where they're not acting on it, but they've have intrusive suicidal thoughts, and it's been going on for a long time. Do you have any recommendations for friends in that scenario who wanna be helpful, not fix their problems or anything like that, but just be more effective in the relationship to help a person like that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that people can often do, and it's like low-hanging fruit, it's not hard to do this. Really just if it's someone you know and it's a friend and they are struggling, chances are if you're close enough that you know a person is struggling, you also know enough about that person to know what are their hobbies? Are they somebody who likes to work out? Are they someone who goes to yoga? Are they someone who loves nature? Like, maybe make some suggestions. Like, let's go to a class. Want to go to a class? Like, let's get them out. Get them out, get them moving. Ask them if maybe they have any interest in going to a fitness class or going out for a run or just going out for dinner if just like just something that can kind of give them a little bit of incentive to jumpstart where they are, and then when you're there and you're doing the thing with them, it's a good opportunity to just start a conversation, start a dialogue. Like, how are you? Like, how are you really? And it's a lot of the time we ask very closed questions. And so it's very easy for people to say, "Oh, I'm good. Nope, everything's great. I'm great. Super, never better." Because we're not actually asking them questions that are open-ended, that are requiring them to answer them with any kind of substance. So when you're with your friends, in whatever context you're with them, asking them open-ended questions about, like, what's going on at work? How is everything at work? How are your kids? How's your relationship with your kids? What's happening, with the business you're trying to start? Anything that drills down a little bit deeper, that encourages that person to give a real legitimate answer. That's often a way to kind of break the cycle, so to
Mhm.
speak, if that person's having a lot of negativity.
Yeah, a theme I'm maybe teasing out from what you're saying is getting them engaged in something in the moment, whether it's an
Mhm.
activity or getting them engaged in a conversation. Because asking like, "How are you?" just very casually doesn't necessarily engage somebody in a conversation. It just kind
No.
of might trigger the automatic response pattern. Like they still have plenty of brain power to go be thinking about something else over here while
Mhm.
they can engage in a very shallow conversation. Um, but if you engage them in something that requires more brain power, it forces them to be present. Is that a fair
Exactly.
assessment?
Oh, it's a very fair assessment. Yeah, exactly. You're causing that person, creating an opportunity for that person to think more deeply about what's going on, to really give you an answer. And, when we do these closed off yes and no questions, there's no opportunity to really dig in and find out what's going on with someone, why they may not be okay, why they may be depressed, i- i- you know, depressed more consistently. Um, but when you ask them to start talking about it, that disrupts the pattern.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
it creates an entry point.
Yeah, that's helpful. So we only have a few minutes left here. I'd love to just give you the floor. Is there any like message that you'd if you could say one thing to everybody on the planet in this moment, like
Oh
somehow just
God.
just channel it into their brain.
Oh boy, this is a big moment for me.
Yeah, what would
Ch-
that be?
I would say, I really would say, wherever you are right now in your headspace, if you're feeling alone, if you're feeling hopeless, if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling anxious or suicidal, or things are just tough in this moment for whatever reason, we tend to forget that there is more than just this moment. We get sucked into with these thought narratives that we're in, and we don't expect that they're going to change. Whatever you're feeling right now, you will not always be feeling this way. There is another side to this, and getting to the other side sometimes means sitting in it, sometimes means, giving that feeling or those emotions the time and the moment to consider them and feel them and then work through them, pass through them. But that's how you get from in the thick of something to the other side of something. That, along with sharing what's on your mind, sharing what's in your head, sharing what you need, and that you're not okay. Because like we said, I think when we first started chatting, if people don't know that you're not okay, they can't help you. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to connect with the people around you, because at the end of the day, those are the people who are there to support you.
Thank you. And then last question is, if people want to reach you specifically, is that something that you invite? And if so, where would they do that?
I absolutely invite that. I have a fairly new platform. It's called the Help Hub, and you can get to it by going to thehelphub.co. And that is not only a platform that has all of my work, all the content that I create, but it's really at this point, it's a pretty massive mental health resources hub that's divided into a ton of different categories, like specific to each community, like the BIPOC community or the LGBTQ community or the elderly or veterans or the Asian community. And there are categories that have resources and support and content within those specific communities, because even though we all go through the same things, we don't all experience them the same way based on who we are, where we come from, our race, our gender, our background. So I wanted to create a resource hub where people could find what they needed that was specific to their unique circumstances. So you can go there. My podcast, The Survivors, is there. I have a YouTube channel as well, and tons of tools. There's a toolkit, a virtual toolkit. If you're actually, ironically, what you and I spend so much time talking about and practicing what to say to someone who's struggling, there are tools with that language on there that you can download, and you can put them on your phone. You can print them out and put them on their fridge. You can practice them on your own. Those are there to source anytime you want, and lots of other resources like that are up there. So, and you can get in touch with me there too. So definitely pop by, take a peek, bookmark it, share it, and give me a shout if there's something that you want to chat about.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'd love if you could stick around for a couple minutes for a quick debrief, but for our listeners' sake, we'll close it here. Thank you for all that. And thank you for teaching me, at least planting the seeds of a new skill with that line of questioning. That's something I will practice myself. It's very nice to know that I can have that, at least in my brain, and accessible to me. So thank you for all you shared today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, Collin. I appreciate you.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.